Hi, this is Rodrigo from Frame Freak Studio, and this is the Creative Hustler Show. Today we have a special guest here. Her name is Casey Robin, and she's a freelance visual development that have worked for companies such as Disney, Zondervan, KlickNation, the Pac-12 Convention, and also she's a huge Harry Potter fan. So, welcome.
Hi, glad to be here. How are you?
Pretty good. So, first of all, for the people who don't know about you, can you tell us your history? How did you get started into art and all this?
Sure. I came from a very artistic, creative family, and then I attended a performing and fine arts charter school. I actually was doing all different kinds of art. I was doing music and writing and theater and visual art and everything. And then when I was about 14, 15, I zeroed in on Disney as my goal. And this was in the age of hand-drawn animation. So I'm like, oh, I want to be a Disney animator. What do I do? And I looked up a bunch of interviews and books, and they all said, learn to draw. So then I went and learned to draw really well, and that was kind of my path for a long time, was just gaining the knowledge needed to work at Disney. And then I got an internship with them in like 2010, I think it was. It was when Tangled was being made. I remember that. And ended up co-directing a short there. And then from there, I've been kind of doing my own thing, developing books and properties and illustrations. I've been doing a lot of hand-drawn illustration for dresses and toys and all kinds of different stuff. And right now I'm working on an illustrated novel that I'm very excited for. But yeah, I got started kind of like everyone else did. I like to draw a lot. And then I found a book that was like the art of Disney. It was specifically the art of Hercules was included in this book. And that kind of set me on this path, which has been really twisty and windy and not what I expected, but really very neat.
What are the things that you didn't expect about all this career?
Well, the first one, I guess, was just how long it would take. I kind of thought, oh, I'll get like by the time I'm 20, I'll be established and set. And I'm 32 now, and I still feel like I'm getting things in order and establishing myself. And so just the long road, and then also how non-linear the path has been. I kind of thought, all right, learn to draw, get into CalArts, get hired at Disney, and work there till I die. And it's been so much more than that, and so many more different kinds of things that I never would have expected. Like last year, Pinup Girl approached me to do a dress for them, and I love their dresses, and I'd never done like a pattern for textiles, but they worked with me on that, so I got the chance to do that, and things like that just happening has been very surprising. Um, yeah, I guess the biggest surprise was that it wasn't what I planned on. I had a very neat path planned out for myself, and it's been anything but.
Yeah, I definitely can agree with that. Like, uh, in this country, there were like a couple of contests that were being done to try to help some artists to get into the industry. And the
Mhm.
idea they had here is that in 1 year you could go like to United States, Europe, something like that, pitch your idea and start to get done that project. And then we start like interviewing people, and we figure out that it takes from 4 to 12 years to get something like that. And it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's
these
about
guys have
right.
the wrong idea.
I know. I tell students expect at least 5 years, and that's without having to move from another country to the US. That's just, from I live in California and I have my whole life. So even for me, I would say it was a good 5 to 10 years, depending on how you want to define established, to get established, Because now I'm at a place where I'm doing what I like to do. I'm working full time in art, and I'm able to kind of make my own call on projects. So I would consider that established, like able to make a living. And that's taken me, gosh, I mean, probably 10 years, maybe a little less, maybe 7, I don't know, but a long time. But it's been interesting. It's not like you're just waiting around that whole time. You're doing stuff. I worked for a game studio for a little while. I worked on the first iteration of Dragon Age, and I didn't even realize it had gone on to be anything until later. um, so it's important to be open um, to taking the time that you need to establish yourself. You just keep putting your work out there. That's how you do it. You keep making stuff, and you keep showing it, and you keep changing and learning and networking. And then over time, your reputation kind of gets out there. People start to see what you can do, and that opens up a lot of doors.
Also, something that I wanted to ask you, I see that you studied in CalArts, and for many artists, like they see CalArts like the pinnacle, like the best thing in the world. And there was an interview that I did with Mark Caballero where he didn't even apply to CalArts in the beginning because he thought like it would be too much for him. And then everybody who saw his portfolio, like you will dominate this game, and that was fun for him.
Yeah.
How was the experience for you?
Well, what I did with CalArts was I actually did their summer program, CISA, for animation. So I forget what CISA stands for. So that was a summer intensive where I got to study hand-drawn animation. It was very neat. And then I went to a Christian liberal arts school to get a basic education for like 2 years. And then my plan was to transfer to like the real CalArts, like big CalArts, not high school, summer school CalArts. And I got into that, but my loan fell through. And so because of money, I wasn't able to go. And I was absolutely crushed. And I thought, oh no, I've completely ruined my chance to have a career. I didn't go to the right school. And I went to a terrible school that everyone should stay away from, the Art Institute. They are bad, like really, really scammy, really, really. They were hiring people off of Craigslist for like animation department heads and things like that. So I did not go to the school I really meant to. I did get a lot out of CISA. I kind of made my first short there, and it was really wonderful to have nothing but animation on my plate for the summer. And I ended up kind of piecing together an education from a lot of different schools. Like I did a little bit over at the Illustration Academy at Ringling. I did their summer program and learned a lot about illustration. I did a consortium with Studio Art Centers International in Florence, where I was studying drawing, painting, sculpture, and illustration in Italy for a year. And so it was, talk about a winding path. I was in and out of schools for like 8 or 9 years, until finally I technically graduated from the Art Institute with literally a BS degree was what it was called, the Bachelor of Science in Computer Animation, which I haven't used at all. What I have used was the things I learned about storytelling, like acting, creating a scene, language of film, art, history, studio art, like fine art drawing has been so helpful to me even in my very simple cutesy illustrations that don't utilize every single thing I learned. It was a great foundation. And then I did a ton of independent study, going to life drawing all the time, constantly drawing from observation, drawing my friends and everybody when they weren't looking, going to IKEA and drawing people on the sly. That's really the kind of education that's been helpful. So CalArts was my golden dream, and I thought that by not going there, I had doomed myself. But it turns out that really, once you get into the industry, people want to know what you can do, and are you easy to work with? Are you reliable? And those are the credentials that really get you in the long run. A good school helps for sure, but if you don't go to CalArts, it's not necessarily a death sentence to your career.
Yeah, definitely. Like in our case, like we didn't have any of that because in this country, like closest thing to that is graphic design, which we did for a little bit, and then we were like, this is not what we had in mind. So we pretty much.
No, graphic design is a different discipline. It has different goals.
Yeah, and we ended up like meeting people like a Stephen Silver who never put a feet inside a university or something like that. So that was like, we can still do this thing. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, and I learned a lot out of books and DVD extras and from other artists, It is good to have a good foundation of fine art training and life drawing. Like that really helps. But you can get a lot online these days. You can get a lot from books. You just have to be really self-motivated.
Pretty much. Also, you're the first person of everybody that we have interviewed so far that has gotten into like designing clothes. And I saw in your Facebook page a couple of dresses that you were wearing. I'm not 100% sure if those were the ones that you designed. And
Oh
if
no,
they
mine's not
were,
out yet. Those are
yeah,
Mary Blair.
if they were amazing.
Oh, thank you. Oh, well, they are amazing. They are from the Mary Blair collection that Pinup Girl put out, and Mary Blair was a wonderful designer. So they've retroactively taken her art and created repeat patterns for dresses that are just gorgeous. I'm a big fan of those. And that was why when they asked me if I wanted to do one, I was like, immediately, yes, 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 yes. It was different though. I didn't know what to expect as far as how to draw for textiles. I had to use very, very thick, very stark ink lines, much more than I would in my normal illustrations, because normally my style is pretty soft and I tend to use shapes and edges more than a lot of line work. So I had to change that. I had to think how these things would look very small, 3 inches tall, and scattered across a dress in a repeat pattern where they would be turned at every angle possible so that no part of the fabric is facing up. It's everywhere is up. So it was an interesting challenge. And my art director, Sarah, really helped me think like a textile designer. So I appreciate that she was willing to let me kind of learn on the job.
Nice. Also, what made you go freelance? Like you mentioned it in the beginning that your biggest goal was like Disney,
Yeah.
and you were there, and then now that you are independent, what made you take that decision to go on your own?
Oh, it was a lot of different things. I mean, partly it was just necessity. It was just needing to make a living and not finding what I was looking for available to me in studio work. There was a time where I didn't really have much of a computer setup, but I had paints and pencils, and so I had to make money with that just to pay my bills, And so what kind of started out of trying to support myself while trying to get a studio job turned out to be something I discovered that I could do where I could kind of call my own shots. I could make my own hours. I could create my own aesthetic and didn't really have to answer to much of anybody. I mean, sometimes my clients give me direction, but usually they come to me because they like what I do and they just say, do what you do. I like what you do. And people were responding to my natural style. And there was something very affirming in that, in being like, oh man, people like me just for being myself. Like, really? I don't have to constantly be changing or pandering or, I mean, I am always learning, but like, it was really interesting to see how much people responded to what I thought was attractive and fun to draw and worth my time, And then the other thing was recently I've had this idea for retelling the myth of Medusa, and it's been in my head for a while, and it's gone through a lot of iterations. But I've decided that I want to, at least for the first iteration of it, do it as an illustrated novel. So I went and found an agent out in New York. He's wonderful, and we're working together on getting that sold so that it can be a real book that people can buy. So I'm working on a manuscript now. It's gone through a lot of story changes. It's very similar to how you develop an animated film, in that the story has to be the best version of the story, not necessarily the first version that you come up with. So it's been through several structural changes, but I feel like it gets better each time. It's like, I've heard someone say that at Pixar, it's like you're building a house and every 2 weeks or so, someone throws a grenade in and blows it all up. And so you're forced to rebuild it stronger. And by the end, you're exhausted, but you've got a really strong house. So that's sort of the approach I've been taking.
Nice. Yeah, I got a couple of friends who are writers, and pretty much they go at least 3 iterations. Like first
Yeah.
they go for the first book, and then they got like completely demolished. Yes. Then they rewrite it again and again and again.
Yeah.
Until
And the characters haven't changed much. I mean, my characters remain basically the same. It's more the events around them have shifted to be more compact or more dramatic. And then the order in which those are told has been shifted, again, to be more interesting.
awesome. Also, I, I've been seeing your art, and while it's simple, I definitely understand why many people tell you like just do what you do, because there is something magical in it that really captures it. How did you get into this style of art? Like, how did you give this kind of soul to your pieces?
Oh, thank you. Well, it's been a long process, and it wasn't necessarily intentional. It was sort of a natural evolution. Um, I suppose it started with, that whole like wanting to be a Disney animator back in the 90s when like that was the thing that was happening. And so going off of the advice of people who I consider to be very good artists, people like Glenn Keane, I just went and learned draw really well and figured, all right, if I learn like from Michelangelo, well, he was pretty good at drawing, maybe I can learn something from him. If I go learn from Caravaggio, maybe I can learn something about light and dark and contrast and focus. And so I do have classical underpinnings, and I started with realistic drawing, but then when I got out on my own and I was kind of establishing myself as Casey Robin, which is sort of my art name. My full name is Casey Robin Neal, but someone already took Casey Neal, so I had to pick kind of a different name. I found that the stuff that was simpler, people tended to respond to that more, I think because they could imprint themselves on it. It was simple enough that they could see themselves in it. It just suggested an emotion or a scene, and then the viewer kind of fills in a lot. I think also that things that are simple tend to reproduce really well, like especially if you're doing it for product design or textiles. Something with a lot of nuanced shading that's very, very delicate doesn't tend to produce well. And at this point, when I was developing my style, I was working in, doing illustration, doing prints, doing things that were meant for print. So I pared it back and pared it back. And then also I was, like when I was at Disney, I was a story artist mainly, but also doing a bit of viz dev. And so from story art, I got this sense that you should make the gesture primary. You should be more concerned with what the character is doing in the scene and how they're feeling than with getting the anatomy right, or the showing how well you can draw hands or muscles or whatever. So I often will simplify things to get a point across so that it's not lost in all this, noodly doodling and frippery. And that's just led me simpler and simpler. I feel like right now I'm in a place where I have gotten this simple style down, and I might want to experiment more and take it a little further back on the spectrum, add in more detail and try something new, because I tend to get bored if I work, if I do too much similar work for too long. So right now I'm thinking maybe a black and white series would be fun, because I tend to use such vibrant color. I wonder what would happen if I took that away. Putting limitations on myself sometimes helps me find my next thing. And actually there was one piece that sort of defined my new style as like, that's it. That's what you should be doing. And it was a present I made for my sister. One Christmas, I didn't have any money for gifts, so I made paintings for everybody. And my sister's favorite animal is the red panda, and she's a redhead. So I painted her holding a red panda, and like, look, it's like you've got red hair, and the animal's got red hair. It's sort of funny. It was a very simple concept. And the style was really warm and really approachable. And my friend looked at it and was like, I think this is your new style. And I'm like, I think you might be right. I'll try with this and see how it goes. And people seem to like it. So, and I like it.
Yeah, me too. Also, there is something that I have, I see a lot of this, especially with artists who are starting out, who maybe they found somebody in the internet who is like really amazing artist and who has like these complex drawings and art. And the thing is that they get this idea that unless they have like these elaborate things, like they won't be able to have success. And it's like, no, like if you put attention, like for example, Snoopy wasn't like the most complex thing in the world. Like the Powerpuff Girls, Dexter, the Cartoon Saloon, they have complex patterns.
Yeah, I love Cartoon Saloon. I love their look and their stories they tell.
So, what do you think there is about like this kind of simpler styles that obviously have so much more success with most people than like the big complex kind of comic thing?
Right. Well, I think you bring up a good point that people, when they're looking at these very complex drawings, it tends to be the students who are starting out, who are learning drawing. I don't know if I lost the feed. You
I'm
keep
here.
talking. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
hi. Yeah. Anyway, so I think people, when they're starting out learning drawing, they just want to know that they can master it. So they pick things that look obviously challenging, you know, things that are more Michelangelo than, you know, Charles Schultz. And even when I was in school, I sort of looked down on things that were simpler, thinking, well, that's not hard. Anyone can do that. And I didn't really get it. It wasn't so much about showing off. It was about expressing something. It was about putting a point across or putting across a relatable character. So I think it's perfectly fine when you're starting out, like, go for it, draw realistically, like, master that and never lose that. Like, I still like to go to classical life drawing and draw the heck out of a figure and draw all the little things. But I think what makes simple designs successful is that they are immediately gettable. They're immediately recognizable. People see them and they get what that's about. Like, if you look at the character design for Inside Out, I've heard people sometimes critique it because, oh, it's too simple. But for me, it works really well because you immediately understand, oh, hey, that's Joy. Yeah, that's what Joy would look like. She's all yellow and she's very like, yay, super energetic. And then Sadness is all like blue and heavy. Sadness is a very heavy emotion. You know, anger is a very compacting emotion, like this. Like, you just feel yourself go, a compacted little square with a flame coming out the top. Really feels like what anger is. And I think it works across any language, any culture. It's a common human experience. I think the big difference is when you're starting out, you are trying to make art that proves yourself, that proves that you're good, you know. And so in that way, you're trying to take something from the viewer. You're trying to take praise, you know. You're trying to be like, please affirm me, please tell me I can draw, you know. And then when you get to a more mature place in your career where you feel confident that, yeah, I can draw, I can do that, now what am I going to do with it? Well, then you can start making art that gives something to people instead of taking, that gives them a feeling of either contentment or excitement or the thrill of fear or whatever it might be that you want to give to those people. And you're no longer looking for them to be constantly affirming you. I mean, at least ideally. I think we all have our days where we feel a little bit insecure. But I was reading a book of interviews by Miyazaki. What he was trying to do with Kiki's Delivery Service, he said, I wanted to make a film to comfort the young women who I see who come to the city, who have to leave their families and are doing this very scary thing. And I wanted to give them assurance that it's going to be okay. And so because he drew Kiki so simply and he went for the emotion of each scene in a very non-pretentious way, that's a really accessible movie. Like, I watch that movie and I feel like, oh my God, I'm Kiki. I, you know, left my home and went to a new city, and I love cats. I don't have a cat because they're not allowed here where I live, but I would if I could. And I lived with a nice lady who reminded me so much of the Baker character in that. And I just feel like art that is accessible and non-pretentious and honest and really from the heart can give a lot of comfort and wisdom to people, you know. I think that's the main difference. It's not to say that elaborate art has nothing to offer. That is certainly not true, because there are people who create beautiful things that do give a lot to people. I just think that the tendency of the young student artist to try and show off their rendering skills, most kind of grow out of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think I ended up like trying to imitate like this kind of realistic kind of drawings in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and I was a lot into that. But because I like admired the skill, but at the end, like when I started like asking, well, like if I'm honest with myself, like there's nothing like that has this kind of complex drawings that really marked something into me. And the things that marked something were like DuckTales or the Gummy Bears or Chip and
Right.
Dale.
Oh, I love gummy bears. I watch that all the time after school. Or even
Yeah,
like Bruce Timm's Batman designs, so simple, you know, the animated Batman series, but boy, do they really capture the characters, right?
Yeah, like it ended up like I think that animated series was like that made Batman so much important. Like even now that DC has no option but to put Batman or they don't even sell.
Right. Well, right. I mean,
Because that
I grew up with Batman, and my favorite version of Batman to this day is the animated series. I mean, Kevin Conroy to me is best Batman. Mark Hamill is my most iconic Joker, although I do admire Heath Ledger's Joker. He's not the first one I think of. And I love those stories for being visually very stylish, very Art Deco. And they did a lot with a very small budget because they had good, solid design. And I love them for being emotionally complex, where you had a lot of a sympathy, a lot of pathos for the people who were doing the wrong thing, but you saw why they were doing it. I think the only irredeemable character in the Batman canon is the Joker, because he never shows concern for anyone but himself, and he never shows remorse for his actions at all. Everybody else has some level of pathos. I mean, especially like Harley Quinn is my favorite character in the Batman universe, and I think it's because not only is she's so fun and fun to be around, and it's like yay, you know, and yet she's so tragic, and you just want to shake her and be like, you can do better, you deserve better, girl. You know, and we got to give credit to the team of Batman the Animated Series for inventing Harley Quinn. You know, Arlene Sorkin had the voice, and Bruce Timm had the design, and that was the first time we saw Harley Quinn, and I give them so much props for that.
Yeah, even now I was seeing like a top 10 movies of Batman or versions of Batman, and like the number one that everybody chose like by far was a movie that is maybe not that well known compared to others, but it was Batman: The Mask of the Phantom, and it was
Yeah,
like
that was
kind of a
intense.
long episode.
Yeah, that was like Batman the Animated Series with a little bit more budget and without having to have it rated for TV. So you could have like a little bit of blood, a little bit of killing, stuff you needed to make the story more hardcore. I actually didn't see that as a kid. I think I just sort of missed it because it was only in theaters for like 2 weeks. But I watched it as an adult, and even seeing it for the first time as an adult, I was pretty impressed with it.
Yeah,
I also like
definitely.
Batman Begins.
Oh,
So.
I also love Batman Beyond, by the way.
Yes, me too. I love watching his training. I love seeing the logistics of him becoming Batman, you know. And I love that they went with Ra's al Ghul as the main villain. That was so unexpected. You would expect it to be the Joker, right? You know, because it's the most recognizable. Like Ra's al Ghul was from the 70s, and not very many people in the mainstream knew him, but it was great to do that dark mentor thing where it's like, I thought I could trust my mentor, but he's evil. What do I do now? You know.
Oh no, I meant Batman Beyond, like the Batman for the future thing that came from
Oh,
the
Batman Beyond. I was talking about Batman Begins.
yeah.
I like pretty much every Batman thing that exists, more or less. I haven't seen The Killing Joke, but I've seen all the other things. I like old campy Batman. I like Tim Burton Batman. I just love Batman.
Also, uh, what are the things that you see in people who are starting like in the art world and that they are making like the most
Yeah.
common mistake that you see that they are making, but that they are not aware that they are making it?
Oh, well, the biggest thing I think would be merely copying the work of others and being like, oh, what's your style? Oh, Steven Universe. I'm like, well, that's not a style. That's a TV show that someone created that already exists. You can copy that and you can learn from it, but you have to create your own identity sooner or later as an artist. You don't want to become a discount version of an artist you really admire. You've got to share something from your life. You've got to share something from your point of view, because ultimately that's what's going to set you apart. Because you'll reach a level when you're out there in the art world and you're working and everyone's good, everyone can draw, everyone's got this level of competence, and then it's just about having something to say and having a unique voice with which to say it. So yeah, I think the biggest mistake is trying to be somebody else or emulating too closely your heroes. You can start that way, but you've got to keep growing from that. And the way to do that is to draw from real life, to draw from observation, and then to be really honest with yourself about what it is you value and what it is you want to share, and then draw from that.
Yeah, definitely something that in the beginning, especially when we went into CTN, to the CTN event, and when we jumped Frederator, our team of artists, since they were coming from El Salvador, which is like not the best place to start an art business or something like that, they were very insecure about their own art. And on my
That's
own,
very
like
common.
I was like really confident about their art, but they weren't about their own.
It's easier to believe in someone else than to believe in yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, and something that happened to me when we start like getting out into these events and meeting other people, and they were having like, oh, we are going to be like the worst there, and then we find out that what you say, like everybody can draw, and pretty much we were at the same level. Now, for me, in my head, it started becoming like, okay, now we have gotten to the point where the technique is not important anymore, but like the message, the feelings, all these things that you told me. How can you make that transition, like into putting more feelings and more and communicate more with the art?
Well, I think it's not necessarily that you're putting in more feelings. It's that you're putting in more honest feelings. I see a lot of young artists draw very typical animation poses where it's like maybe a sassy girl and she's like this and like, and that's a very generic pose and it's cute and perky and it almost always works. But you got to ask yourself, who is this girl? What is she afraid of? What is she good at? How would that make her move? You know, how is she acting in this moment? And you have to really try and actually enter your character's skin and live in their skin in a very genuine way. And it has to go beyond making funny faces or cute faces. And it has to be something real. So for that, you've got to look to your own life, look to your friends and your family. It helps if you keep a journal. It helps if you read, honestly. Having an understanding of character and storytelling, I have found reading and going to plays and regularly going to museums and things to be really invaluable, because you get a sense of how to put across a character. And then a nice challenge to do is to start trying to get more concept or more story or both into your work. So lately I've been focusing mostly on design and just pure color and shapes, but I always try to have at least a concept that ties the series together, even if it's as lame as a pun. I did a whole series called Ladybugs, where it was ladies dressed as bugs. And it's not very high concept, but it was like one step beyond just drawing cute girls, which is what I like to do, and it's so easy to do. I think the next step would be, all right, well, designs, now put them in a story scenario. And that's something that I'm turning my eye to right now as I'm, thinking of this illustrated novel, with my background in story art, is getting more story in my pictures, because I've kind of developing a style, and now I think it's time to tell a story more. So the transition is not a quick one, it's not an instantaneous one. It's more about continually asking yourself, am I being honest? Am I actually engaging with my characters, or am I merely creating something that looks like the other things that I've seen already in animation? And you don't want to just do that. You want to go a little further with it. You want to try and tell a story with it. You want to try and share something of your own childhood or your own family or a funny story. And that's the kind of thing that people will respond to, even if they don't know why, because they can relate to it.
Yeah, something that Brett Dean told me in the last interview was that something that you just mentioned, that once he saw like the portfolio of people, he could like get really fast if this portfolio is made to get a job, or this portfolio is made of art that has passion behind it, and
right,
like the
you can
spirit.
tell so quickly.
I
and there's
think your
nothing
art
wrong
is
with
like,
gaining competencies.
yeah, I think your work, when I see it, it's like the second, like, wow, like there is a lot of life, even if it is a simple drawing. There is a lot of life in here.
Thank you. And again, that comes from a foundation of life drawing and observational drawing and classical drawing. And then I combine it with my love of animation. So if I only ever drew from animation, I don't think it would have that spark of life in it. And that's something that I want to encourage all students to do, is just to draw real people, real plants and animals, and then put your own spin on it.
Also, there was something else. I've seen Hayao Miyazaki say it many times, and also other artists. You mentioned kind of it, a little bit about it too. Is that for animators and artists, like one of the most important things is like living, like going out, experience things. Because I see that many people like pretty much they just close up inside their room and start like drawing, and that's very limiting.
Right.
And for example, there was a moment I was traveling through Bulgaria, and I never was there for the spring season, and it was starting the spring. It was just ending the winter, and I was in a very tall building, and when I saw my window, it was like snow was coming up from way below, like going upwards, and it's like, what is this?
Wow.
And I went in, and it was the pollen of all the trees across pretty much blowing it up. And yeah, I could see like even how these stories that they had from the Balkan region came up to be like fairies and things like that, because somebody like way young would see that, and it's like, holy shit, it's not.
Yeah, the kind of stories I tend to be folk tales and old fairy tales, and often that comes from trying to grapple with the weird or intangible or even really sad things in life. I mean, you notice if you go back in mermaid lore, they typically weren't friendly like Ariel. They were typically about drowning people. And they tended to exist more in cultures where there was a great fishing trade, where people were going to sea a lot. And you needed an explanation for why all these people were drowning and why sailors aren't coming home. And the lore is built up around that, you know? It's a very interesting way of looking at the world. It's very much a child's logic, you know, like when you're little, you think you can explain things like, well, a fairy did it. And I've managed to kind of keep that part of my brain alive, even though I know it's not literally true. I like coming up with whimsical explanations for things that don't go off of grown-up logic. And I think some of my favorite cartoons have that kind of cartoon logic where it's like, why can they talk to animals? Because they're sympathetic, and the animals know that they're good. You know, like Snow White, like because she is a kind person, the animals recognize her heart and her spirit, and they're not afraid of her, and they help her out. And I try, like when I go out and I see a deer, because I live out near the edge of the forest, I try to like project that goodness, like, I'm not gonna hurt you, I'm okay. And I know that it won't work, but in my mind, I feel like they're my friends. That's pretty dorky, but and so in my own stories, I like to have that kind of magical logic or magical realism or fairy tale logic above like literal scientific logic, because I think it's more interesting, and to me it's more emotionally true.
Also, something that I wanted to ask you is that for many years, probably the last 100 years, it has been this idea that art was the insecure path, that if you went into art, like you will die of hunger or something, you will have a living. And now we're getting into a really funny place, because technology is pretty much making obsolete many of the stable jobs that we used to have. Like there are many jobs that even right now they are considered like the big things, but if you see all the information, you see that all these jobs are going away like really, really fast.
Right.
And the jobs that are now becoming like the stable thing is like art, technology, entrepreneurship, like all these things that were considered crazy for people for many years. How do you see that impacting right now in the industry?
Well, I think you're right when you say that we're seeing a shift in the job market right now because of digitization and globalization. Jobs that had once been very stable are no longer a sure thing. You tend not to see people staying with one company their whole life and then they retire and that's the norm. That's more the exception now. So now everybody has to hustle. Everybody has to adapt with the market and think, okay, what can I offer that no one else can offer? Or what can I offer the best that'll be competitive in this new marketplace? And so with art, the nice thing about it is it has a variety of uses. So I have used my art and I've been paid to help sell toys, to help make books more awesome, to help sell dresses, to help make people aware that the Pac-12 conference now has 12 different, what do you call them, teams. I'm not a sports person. Instead of 10 like they used to have. They wanted me to make like a Pixar style map thing for that. So there are all these different ways of using art. The difficult thing, I think, is to figure out how your work is useful to the market and to consistently get work in that. So that's hard. It takes some time starting out, figuring out how you can contribute to the market. Like, is it, oh, I'm really, really good at textures and rendering, so I'm going to go into, doing look dev at a studio and that's fairly stable? Or is it, well, I really like to design characters, so I'm going to, try that. And, oh, it didn't work out in comics. Oh, but it worked out well in kids' books. You have to just keep trying things. And sometimes that means having like a side hustle, having some kind of side job when you're starting out and you're getting your client list. But usually over about the space of 5 years or so, you'll start to see where you fit in and where you can best use your skills and where people will value them. And then you just kind of continually keep a finger on that pulse. So if you feel like, well, when I started, I was getting a lot of book work, but now that's drying up. I need to try something else. You just have to remain really active. I think in any career, if you get complacent and stagnant and you stop evaluating of, am I contributing something? Is it being valued? It's very easy to find yourself in a really bad financial place because you got stagnant and what you needed wasn't like filling the needs of the market. So it's on one hand, it's really hard and scary because you can't relax and just let a company take care of you. But on the other hand, it's very exciting because you get to, you have more freedom in what you can do and you can try different things. And if they don't work out, you just move on to the next thing. It's kind of exhausting, honestly. I'm getting to a place where having 8 employers simultaneously is no longer a wonderful thing to manage, and I'm looking to pare it down. But eventually you start to get a reputation, and people start to know what you can do. And I mean, there are even people who have stable studio jobs who are looking to get into something more, who are like, oh yeah, I know I have that stable job, but man, I really want to do kids books, or man, I really want to make a toy line. So I just feel like it never really ends. You're always active in your career rather than passive, rather than sitting back and being like, well, I did my job, give me paychecks and a retirement plan. You're always more like, all right, how can I do the next thing? So it's tired making, but it's very good.
Yes. I think many of this comes from something that is very opposite of art, I think, which is like learning the business skills
Yeah,
of
that's important.
everything. And it's hard because I feel like there are little people who I consider that have both, like
Mm-hmm.
the business skills and also the art. For example, in our case, like I'm the one focusing on the working business and all that, and my team is the one like doing completely the art, and we work pretty much that way. But what would you be your advice for people who have the art skills but don't
Uh-huh.
have like the sales and business skills?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing you can do is learn a couple of basic things that I think is good for anyone to know, excuse me, regardless of whether they want to be more entrepreneurial or more secure in their work. I think it's important to learn how to send an invoice. That's something that's really easy, but a lot of artists like freak out when they hear the word invoice. All an invoice really is a way to get paid, and that's exciting. I use FreshBooks, and it's very simple. You just plug in your client's contact info and what the job was and how much they owe you, and then you send it through email. So invoicing is not so hard. The other thing I see people struggling with is how to price their work. And I get that. It's kind of scary at first to expect money for your work and be like, how much? I don't know. And what's been really useful to me in that has been the Graphic Artists Guild Handbook of Pricing and Ethical Guidelines. So that explains not only what the ethical guidelines are for a good contract and stuff, but also how much in the ballpark you should be charging for any given skill. It's not got every single thing in there, but it's got enough that you can kind of get an idea. And then talk to your friends too. Like if you have a friend who's really good at getting jobs, ask them how they do that. Ask them to explain it to you. Most people who have skills are willing to share them, especially when you're young and you're all starting out. And then if all of that just super stresses you out and you don't want to deal with it, I would look for a studio job. Because then you won't have to deal with certain aspects of billing and invoicing and the hustle, the business hustle. Or if you still want to stay freelance and you don't want to do a studio, then you could consider hiring someone to manage your finances and your business stuff. That requires quite a bit of money, so that's not a good option for everybody, but it is an option. Maybe you just hire someone to do your taxes because taxes freak you out. And then that's, maybe not as much as hiring a full-time assistant. I guess it's just important to know that the business stuff isn't as scary as you think it is. I'm not a numbers person, and there are good resources out there to help you with it. And then if you really, really don't want to do it, you have other options.
Yeah, to be honest, I use Xero for invoicing, and pretty much I think it was way harder a couple of years ago than it is now.
Yeah, it's gotten very simple. It's like so many things with the web. It become very, very simple. Like getting a taxi used to scare me, but Uber I can handle,
Yes, also, if you wake up tomorrow and you wake up in a whole different dimension, nobody knows you, you don't have your reputation anymore, but you have all your knowledge, all your skills, and $500 in your pocket, what will you do to get to this point as fast as possible?
Well, I would probably start going from door to door around town and seeing what people need. It's old fashioned, but I have done that before where it's like, hey, they might need art. Let's go talk to them. And you just, all right, I'm going to go to a place where people have money and need design. I would throw together a portfolio, say, of a few samples, and I would take it around physically because I think actually building relationships face to face is the quickest and most powerful way to get work and to get lasting work that's good. Yeah, I would do it the old fashioned way. I'd go around with a physical portfolio and look for likely places. I mean, I did this in France where I had no reputation and no money, and I wanted to stay in Paris, and I wanted to figure out a working situation there. I ended up getting a job with a cosmetic company that needed like a graphic design intern or something. And I would have taken it, except I got majorly sick to the point where I had to go home. But the old-fashioned way of just going around and seeing what businesses might need you is quaint but effective. I suppose then you would also want to start your social profiles up again. It takes time to establish a large fan base, but the sooner you start, the sooner you've got it. You never know from which direction an opportunity will come, so best to maximize all of them, at least in the beginning.
Nice. Also, for us, going to events, like big events in business and in art, was something new that we started doing last year. For example, CTN, that's where we found you. What would be your advice for people who are going for the first time to this kind of events?
The first time exhibiting or the first time attending?
Both.
Both. Okay. Well, first off, I want to say that I have found that going to events like CTN or, Comic Cons, that kind of thing, going to conventions that are about what you do, where people are passionate about it, has been really, really helpful for my career, for my fan base, for my friendships. And I would encourage all artists, as soon as you feel ready, to get into that. So say, we'll just use CTN as an example, since it's the most specific to this market, to the people who love animation and want to do that for a living. I would say that the first time you go, I would go in with with no expectations. Just go and observe, go and absorb. Don't put a lot of pressure on yourself to walk out of there with a job. Go and do reconnaissance. Check out, okay, what's the market like? What are the different employers? What does it look like they need? Maybe you do a portfolio review if you're feeling comfortable with that. If you're not in a place where you feel comfortable having your portfolio reviewed right there, because the first time can be very overwhelming, maybe you just go the first time and just look and just take cards and then do research. And then maybe the second time you've got a portfolio and you feel comfortable showing it. And you just kind of go from there. The other thing that is really important is to talk to people, because a lot of your jobs, a lot of opportunities, and a lot of important knowledge for the industry can come by creating personal relationships with other artists, and be really genuine about it. Like, don't go up to people and be like, hi, how can you benefit me? Are you famous? Can I have a job from you? People hate sorry, people hate that. They can tell right away if you're just selfishly digging for like any little thing that you can get from them and you don't care about them as a person. That tends to turn them off. That's the bad way to network. The good way to network is to like open up a real conversation and be like, hey, oh, I like this piece. Like, it's a piece you actually like. What's the story behind that? And they'll tell you a story. And maybe you find you have some common interests. Maybe you find that you have a common like path in the art world. Like, oh, hey, you didn't go to CalArts either? Oh man, me neither. Like, where'd you go? What was it like? I've gotten I have friends who I know through CTN who have been so encouraging and helpful to me over a long course of time, and I help them out whenever I can. I try to support them, and then they try to support me as they can. And it's not a one-to-one interaction. It's not like, all right, I did a favor for you, now you do a favor for me. It's not like the mob, you know. It's more like creating an actual community, and it's really trying to go in and find your place and see what others are doing, and try not to feel threatened by other people's success, because they aren't you, and they're in a different place than you, and maybe they've been doing this longer than you, or they had an opportunity that you didn't have. Don't let that stand in the way between you and making relationships with other people. Try and go in and look at it as a big community of artists with many different opportunities, many different styles, many different employers, and try to see how you can fit into that. And then just be honest with yourself. Like, ask yourself, is this really what I want? Because sometimes you might think you want to work in animation, and then you get to CTN and you're like, wow, I do not want to do this. I had a friend who had that experience. She was kind of kicking around the idea. She loved to draw. She loved like fantasy stuff, and went to CTN and was just like, nope, 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 so much nope, and decided that maybe children's books were a better path. And that's okay. Sometimes you go and you have the benefit of discovering that that isn't the right path for you. But try not to be intimidated. We're all just people. We're all on our way, just trying to put art out there, trying to make good stuff, trying to survive. And if you go in with that mindset, I think you're much more likely to make good, lasting relationships, to have a good time, and to ultimately find your place in the animation community. Oh, and if you're exhibiting, I didn't even touch on that. So that's just going. If you're exhibiting, I would say limit what you display. Don't display everything. Put it in a couple of collections. Highlight your best stuff. Make it very clear what you do. Make sure your name's on the banner, because a lot of times I'm like, oh wow, I love that person. Who is it? They're out of cards. They don't have their name anywhere on the art. They didn't have their name on the banner, and I can't remember who they are. I'm like, I was going to invite them for a show, but I can't find their name, So make sure your name's on stuff. Make sure you have enough business cards, and then again, go in with no particular expectations and just see what happens that first time. And don't put too much money into it. Don't expect to make a ton of money the first time. Be very modest in how many prints you bring. Don't make 20 of everything. Think of it as, go in thinking as, I'm going to meet a lot of interesting people, and who knows, maybe there'll be some great opportunities, but I'm going to show them what I do and tell them who I am.
Also, what are your favorite events to attend to?
Well, I do love CTN because it is kind of my time to catch up with everybody from all over the world. I have a friend from Singapore, and I get to see her at CTN. I have friends who don't live here normally, and we tried to catch up then. So I love it for that, and I love it for people get it. Like if I were to geek out about Fred Moore, people would understand who I was talking about and not be like, what? What's a Fred Moore? I just hear because I like Game of Thrones, So I like that. I love Harry Potter events. They're my favorite as far as just relaxing and geeking out. I just went to Mysticon, and we took over a campground in Lake Winnipesaukee, and it was like magical wizard camp, no muggles, and so we could all be as weird as we wanted. I went hot tubbing with a guy in full Lucius Malfoy cosplay. It was great. You can wear your weird witchy stuff, and I love that. I also really love like brony conventions. I haven't done one in a while, but Everfree Northwest, I was really into My Little Pony when it first started, like seasons 1 and 2, and I really identified with Applejack. So I went as Applejack. I got a booth and made it look like Sweet Apple Acres, and I had my mom, and she pretended to be Granny Smith, and we stayed in character the whole time. And it was weird, but it was just kind of fun. It was like being in a play, it was like being a character at Disney parks, and everyone wanted to meet Applejack and meet the Apple family, and we just loved to play that part. WonderCon a lot. I mean, Comic-Con is great, but for me, it's very big and a little bit overwhelming because I'm kind of afraid of big crowds. So, of course, Comic-Con is a challenge. But WonderCon to me is a lot more manageable in size. And I feel like it's a great sort of everything convention like Comic-Con, but without the giantness. It's much more small and small compared to Comic-Con. It's much more artist driven. So I guess those are some of my favorites, CTN, WonderCon, PotterCons, and particular brony conventions, especially Everfree Northwest, because Seattle's great.
Funny that you mentioned My Little Pony. I remember I saw when it was starting to get like really, really famous or worldwide. I remember I saw like this documentary about all these about this event, about My Little Pony and how it was growing.
I know people in those documentaries.
The funny thing is that you started to see like people from motorcycle gangs, like who looks like rockers with the barrels of spikes and all that. In there.
Military bronies, there are all kinds.
It was funny to see that. Also, is there any advice you would like to give to people who are starting into art that we haven't talked about?
Well, I have given a lot of my main advice, which I'll just reiterate briefly. Be yourself. That's so cliched, but it's so true. Try not to become a carbon copy of your favorite show or your favorite artist. Experiment and try new things and try to find your own voice over time. And then, get yourself out there, keep networking, keep trying. And I guess the advice I would give that I haven't discussed yet. And the other piece of advice is draw from life, like learn to draw for realsies, and then you can draw whatever you want, but get that foundation laid down. The other big piece of advice that I haven't really touched on yet is to be kind to yourself. I have so many artist friends, and I am one, and I know how we can be very unkind to ourselves. It's so easy to beat yourself down. Oh, why haven't you gotten a job yet? Why haven't you achieved fame yet? Why don't you have a book yet? Why don't you have this? Why haven't you made a movie yet? And if that's the constant internal dialogue that's running through your brain, it makes it so hard to create anything, So try to know that you're doing your best, like actually do your best. Because if you're not doing your best, then I can't guarantee things will go well for you. But if you're doing your best and you're just on this path and you haven't, feel like you made it yet, it's important to realize that you may never feel like you've made it. Some of your heroes don't feel like they've made it. We are always striving. We're always looking for that next thing. And I have friends who have like directed Disney movies. They're like, yeah, but you know what I really want is, and so that that success is fleeting, and success with a capital S is so tricky to define. And just try to live a happy life on a day-to-day basis while you're striving. Try to be a good friend. Try to have good family relationships. Try to go out and see movies and appreciate the beauty of nature and live your life. Don't stop living just because you're training to get into animation. Do work hard. There are times where you have to, work hard on your student film, or you have to pull all-nighters, you have to pull those 18-hour days for a long time. That's okay, but try not to lose yourself in it. Try to make sure you have real friendships. Even it's really important too to have friends outside the industry, because otherwise it just feels like that becomes the whole world and you lose perspective really quickly. And above all, try to be kind to yourself. Give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Speak well of yourself. If you catch yourself saying horrible, mean things to yourself in your head, like, oh my God, you're such a loser, like everyone hates you and no one's ever going to give you a job, think, would I ever say that to a friend or even an enemy? And if you wouldn't, then don't say it to yourself either, because you need to make art from a place of wholeness and relative calm. If you're making it from a place of desperation, your art will look desperate. But if you're making it from a place of quiet wisdom, your art will be able to give things to others. So be nice to yourself.
That is so important. To be honest, I'm one of those as well. I have been struggling a lot in the last probably 8 months to kind of stop doing that.
It's something I struggle with on a daily basis. I was having to reroute my thoughts this very morning.
Yeah, two books that helped me a lot on understanding kind of new techniques in my mind to not do that and still do it. Like you say, like it's a voice that you have to beat every day of your life. But two books that helped me out. One was called The Practicing Mind. It's really short, but it's really great. And the other one is called Daring Greatly from Brené Brown. That is a shame researcher. So it's
cool. One book that I think that's cool. I like the recommendations. When I think of this, I tend to go back to The Little Prince, which is just my favorite book. And there's this part in The Little Prince where there's this guy who lives on a teeny tiny planet about the size of a house, like the Little Prince's planet. And there are baobab seeds that get in there and will start to grow. And the Little Prince is very rigorous about uprooting these baobabs before they become big, huge trees. But this other guy on this other planet, he's like, it's fine. I'll just leave them there. They're not hurting anything. And then they take root and they get to be huge trees and they crumble his planet apart. So I think of my thoughts and managing my internal dialogue as uprooting the baobabs before they get to be a problem,
Definitely I can identify with that. Also, if people want to find you on internet, how they can do it?
Sure. Well, I'm on all the major social media channels. I have taken a brief hiatus from social media because I'm working on a book and I need to focus. So if you don't see much new from me this summer, it's because I'm working on a book and I need to focus. But I'm going to try and post a few things just so I don't completely fall off the map. You can find me on Instagram at Casey Robin. And then you can find me at caseyrobin.com. I have an Etsy shop. I love interacting with people through my Instagram, through my Etsy. I love knowing that my prints are going out all over the world. I take custom commissions, although I'm kind of backlogged right now. And then on Twitter and Facebook, it's at Casey Robin Art, because Casey Robin was taken already. But usually it's just, if you look up Casey Robin, you'll find me. And it's Robin like the bird, Robin.
Thanks a lot for giving us your time and sharing all your knowledge.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun. I hope this is helpful. And please keep in mind that this is just my experience and my opinions. But if anything here is helpful to you who are watching, I just hope everything goes well for you. I hope you have a wonderful art journey and meet so many interesting people and have so many interesting projects come your way. And thank you. It's been really fun talking with you. I love talking art.
It's been really fun talking to you too as well. I really love this conversation.
Thanks. All right.
This has been the last episode from our show. So please, if you have liked it, click like on the YouTube button down below, and please share this interview with all your friends. Until next time.